English folklore is quite diverse, to put it lightly. There are literally hundreds of tales of fantastical creatures who capture the hearts and minds of young children growing up for the past several centuries. Fairies, elves, and dragons, they all play a role in helping develop a young child's imagination. But some of these creatures, of course, aren't all romantic ideas of good-natured beings. Some serve as a terrifying reminder that you can't look at the world through rose-colored glasses. Join me in this episode as we look into one of these creatures, known as Jenny Greenteeth. Welcome back to Moonlight Lore. As always, I am your host, Jordan Hopkins. In this episode, we are looking into the folklore behind one of England's more terrifying creatures, Jenny Greenteeth, also known as Jenny Greenteeth or Wicked Jenny. Now, Jenny is a water hag, known to live in the darkened swamp water or rivers that flow through England's countrysides. It's here she makes her home, away from the public eye, waiting for her next victim to walk a little too close to the water's edge. As she waits, she watches, maybe making a small noise in the water or thick river grass to lure the attention of her unsuspecting prey who dared approach her home. Once her target is close enough to the water, she'll burst from the surface, let out an intense high-pitched scream, throwing her victim completely off guard and into a state of shock. In a flash and a spray of water, she'll reach out her long, lanky arms to grab the petrified child or adult, and drag them into the water to drown and then later consume. Typically, it is said Jenny Greenteeth is a master of disguise when in her natural habitat. With her skin varying between pale bluish green to a darker emerald green, her whole body can blend into the dark-colored swamp water she resides in, and with the help of her long, tangled dark wet hair, she can drift calmly through the stagnant water, without being noticed even by the most perceptive of people. She is said to have algae, swamp weeds, and roots covering her body, providing more of a disguise to anyone wary enough to check the waters before venturing close to the edge. With her sharpened fingernails and razor-sharp teeth, she makes short work of anyone she manages to bring into the depths of her home. Mostly, she likes to target young children who are innocent and unaware of the dangers of venturing close to the water, or the elderly who are typically incapable of fighting back against the vicious attacks she unleashes. In short, she goes after what she would believe to be the easiest prey, but her favorites are definitely children, as she deems them to be the fresher and more delicious. While the folklore behind Jenny Greenteeth is interesting, and more than likely never a true actual creature, the idea behind her was actually a good thing. From the early 19th century to the present day, young children are warned and told the story of Jenny, creating a boogeyman-type creature for the children to fear. With this fear comes along paranoia, and occasionally with that comes caution and safety. The purpose behind telling a young child about the folklore of Jenny is the parents can't keep their eyes on the children 100% of the time. So if their child decides to run off and play, they will be maybe too scared or at the very least extra cautious around bodies of water, making the case of accidental drownings a lot less common. Oftentimes in the early 19th century, there were cases of children getting tangled in the thick river grass and weeds, causing their ability to swim to suffer and end up perishing in the water after being unable to free themselves. Other times, rivers and ponds are often obstructed by thin layers of algae, making it impossible for anyone, child or adult, to gauge the proper depth of the water. Now, if someone isn't quite a strong enough swimmer, they could wade or walk through the water to suddenly fall through and disappear under the water and algae after walking over a deep pocket of water they couldn't previously see. Then, in their panic, they would kick and wave their hands about to try and swim back up, but while doing so, getting tangled in the thick weeds and vines under the water. To anyone else above the water watching their friend or family member abruptly fall deep under the surface, with obvious signs of struggling underneath, only for the splashing and air bubbles to slowly stop, would make anyone think something had pulled them down under and held them there. Hence where the idea of Jenny Greenteeth would come into play. As one of England's boogeymen specifically created to scare and warn children away from bodies of water they shouldn't be playing by, The seeds planted in the minds of those now grown children remains, and many remember the terror they felt every time they had gone near the water. Some of course grew out of it, but there are others who feel a little bit of uneasiness near stagnant bodies of water. For those who think back on the times they were warned about Jenny by a family member, those memories can serve to be pleasant reminders of the past. Sitting around a living room and being told of strange creatures and beasts, providing a form of entertainment for those who lack television or radios. So in a sense, Jenny Greenteeth had become a creature who triggers fond memories, rather than fear. But of course there are still those who hold resentment towards her. For those living in the county of Lancashire, the roots of the legend of Jenny Greenteeth run deep. Nowadays though, other than a few of the older folks, most have forgotten about Jenny and her influence she had over the minds of children. But the legend is still cemented in this area, so much so that Jenny actually has what seems to be relatives in the form of other water hags. Grindylows can be considered to be an umbrella name for many water spirits and hags, as the description matches exactly with that of Jenny Greenteeth. Grindylows have scaly green skin, sharp claws and teeth, long lanky arms with slender fingers, and of course, they wait and watch from the water for any children who wander a little too close. There's also Nellie Longarms, who is the name for a hag that is basically the exact same as Jenny, so we won't go into her all too much. But then there's also Peg Powler. She is described in a similar way to that of the Grindylows and Jenny Greenteeth, but in certain versions of her story, she appears to be a little different. Unlike Jenny, Peg actively hungers for the flesh of children and young men. Instead of waiting for her victims to fall in, she causes them to by grabbing their ankles and pulling them into the water. She was even to have been said to climb out of the water on foggy mornings or evenings and transform herself into a beautiful young woman. Hunting in the thick fog, she would try to find young men to lure away, where they would become distracted by her beauty only to trip and fall into a river or pond where she would drown them. Other times when she was in her transformed persona, she would act like a drowning victim to trick young men into saving her by diving head first into the water. Once her new victim had fallen for her ploy, she would transform back into her hideous true self in front of the terrified eyes of the unfortunate man, grab onto his shoulders, and push him down into his dark underwater grave. Stories like Jenny Greenteeth and Peg Powler aren't only exclusive to England. These types of stories involving the warning of children to stay away from bodies of water due to some kind of malicious creature reoccurs throughout the entire world. England's neighbor to the north, Scotland, have their own versions of danger that lures children to the water. The water horse, or also often known as a kelpie in Scottish folklore, are shapeshifters who reside near and in the lochs and rivers of the Scottish landscape. I'm planning on doing an episode about water horses in the future, so I won't go into too much detail about them right now, but typically as shapeshifters, they like to transform themselves into beautiful white or black horses trotting along the edge of the water, enticing children to come and climb on their backs for a ride. Once the child had climbed onto the back of the horse, it will begin picking up speed, running faster and faster, causing it so the child becomes too scared to jump off. The water horse then speeds into the water, nearly running on the surface, only to slowly sink below, taking the child into the depths of the loch with them. Then there's Rusalka from Russia. This water spirit isn't exactly like Jenny Greenteeth in a sense that they are specific creatures, but rather similar to that of a zombie, believe it or not, which was created from the corpse of a young woman who had died or been killed in the water. Often the death occurs due to an unhappy marriage ending with either the suicide of the woman or the purposeful killing of the woman by her abusive husband. As an act of revenge, the spirit of the woman returns to her lifeless corpse and reanimates to live on the remaining years she was supposed to live, but as a Rusalka. During her new life, she doesn't specifically target only children to drown and devour, but mainly young and middle-aged men, usually the ones who led her to be this way. But a Rusalka's life doesn't mean she's forced to live this way forever. If she is avenged and the man who killed her is then killed himself, either by her hand or the hand of another, her spirit can rest and be free from the curse. There are so many water spirits, hags, and dangers we can get into, and I'm thinking I'll save them for a future episode, but if you're interested in learning more about the different kinds around the world, I'll rattle off a few names for you here. There's the Nixie from Scandinavian folklore, The Selkie, which I have already planned for doing an episode on, it's another ocean creature, though much less malicious, but still can be dangerous. She hails from Celtic and Norse mythology. The Siren, of course everyone knows about them from Greek mythology. The Bunyip, a water-dwelling creature from Australia folklore. Lara, from Brazilian folklore, is similar to that of a mermaid or siren, luring men to the water to drown. But I think you get the point I'm putting down here. The fact is, water spirits and hags are a common theme in many cultures everywhere, and Jenny Greenteeth is just simply one of many. Though we can't dismiss the horror all these stories instilled in the minds of children all over the world. Jenny Greenteeth had become so influential to some over the years, some who were threatened with a visit from Jenny were also inspired by her for their work. Ridley Scott, director of the movies The Martian, Alien, and Blade Runner, and so much more, was inspired to make one of the antagonists in his 1985 fantasy movie Legend, based off of Jenny Greenteeth. This antagonist is known as Meg Mucklebones, a swamp hag who the hero, which was Tom Cruise, encounters during the movie.
Who needs this tender morsel? Disturbing Meg Mucklebones' rest.
Jack. They call me Jack, ma'am.
And what a fine, fat boy you are, Jack.
You don't really mean to eat me, do you, ma'am?
Oh, indeed I do!
Yes, but that would be a shame because someone as fair and lovely as yourself, Miss Meg, deserves far better than scrawny me. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Terry Pratchett, author of the famous Discworld fantasy novels, wrote in the character of Jenny Greenteeth in the novel The We Free Men. Of course, Jenny was used as the main antagonist against the two child protagonists who unfortunately had wandered too close to the water's edge. She captures one of the young children and uses him as bait to attract the other. The pure horror she brought had even been added into the popular board game Dungeons & Dragons, as a monster many adventurers would go on to encounter in their games. She would go on to make appearances in various poems, short stories, video games, and other board games for many to appreciate. It would seem, even though many have forgotten her, there are those who still try their best to keep her alive for the younger generations to fear and to also enjoy. Even though we know Jenny Greenteeth is nothing more than just a simple story to keep children from perishing in the water, just like hundreds of other creatures had been used around the world, we can't deny she had seemed real for so many people growing up in the past century. In the many different works that had involved her over the years, it has become quite clear this is one water hag that will not die, even after over a century of her story being told. As a cautionary tale used to instill fear over adventurous children who risk their safety near the water's edge, I personally feel even though Jenny Greenteeth is portrayed as an evil character, her presence is actually quite good. If the threat of her helps keep reckless children away from the water, and in turn keeps them from drowning, I say she is a welcoming individual. Plus, I'm also in the encampment that children should have a little bit of fantastical fear in their lives. It provides them with a sense of wonder about the world and encourages the imagination to grow. We can see the proof, just from how impactful the stories of Jenny Greenteeth were for so many people growing up, who went on to writing books, directing movies, and creating games with her as a subject in their work. Hopefully I speak for the majority when I say that I hope stories like Jenny Greenteeth continue to remain popular, as to provide further entertainment and offer up the world just a bit more magic. I hope you enjoyed this short creature feature episode. I know it's a bit shorter than my usual episodes, but unfortunately with my full-time job, I'm really only able to get a few hours each week to read, write, record, and edit these next few episodes. But again, as I said in the last episode, I'll do my best to get these episodes out on schedule, but we'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime though, if you'd like to help out the podcast, leaving a 5-star review on iTunes does just so. It only takes a minute and it helps the podcast grow a ton. Another way to help is by telling your friends or family who you think might also be interested in the topics I talk about on here. But of course, your constant support and just listening is more than enough to keep me motivated, so thank you. If you have any topics you might want to hear on the show, or you have a story you might want to share about the paranormal or supernatural, or if you just wanted to simply say hi, feel free to email me at moonlightlorepodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram at moonlightlorepodcast, where I post a few pictures relating to the topics I talk about on here. But until next time, keep your lanterns lit and keep exploring the unknown.